How do you define Christian nationalism?
You're in a conversation and someone throws around the term Christian nationalism. Maybe they're claiming to be a Christian nationalist, or maybe they're accusing someone else of being a Christian nationalist. What would you say?
Today, we examine a revealing report that highlights a movement gaining increasing influence in America's political and religious landscape: Christian nationalism.
But what we find over and over in our work is that really it's much more precise to talk about Christian nationalism, because once we account for Christian nationalism, this desire to see the United States as a distinctively Christian nation, the differences between evangelicals and other religious groups actually disappears.
In northern Idaho's dunes of grains and grass, a battle without bullets over the direction of a town.
I believe that what's happening in Moscow is a microcosm of what's happening all across the country that started here maybe 10 or 15 years earlier than what's happening across the country.
And that is?
Well, just the radical division. I don't think our nation has been this divided since 1859. It's divided and it's inflamed.
The next time you hear someone throw around the term Christian nationalism, remember these three things. First, the term Christian nationalism must be defined. Especially in recent years, Christian nationalism has become a generic term of abuse hurled by the political left at Christians who believe faith and morality are relevant to politics.
Moscow is how these two entities live side by side, and I mean literally. Right behind me, that's the offices of the Christ Church. And right next door is the headquarters for the local Democratic Party.
From this former art house movie theater, Wilson leads his campaign to make Moscow a Christian town. Then there was this, a psalm sing in the middle of the pandemic, protesting the local mask mandate, retweeted by then President Trump.
And the entire world, a Christian world. Over the decades, he's built an international network of more than 150 churches. And last month, he opened a new one, just 3 blocks from Capitol Hill.
I'd like to see the nation be a Christian nation. I'd like to see the world be a Christian world.
And now Wilson's controversial views as a Christian nationalist are gaining sway in the nation's center of power with the recent opening of his new church and high-profile parishioners like Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Is planting a church in D.C. part of your mission to try to turn this into a Christian nation?
Yes. So every society is theocratic. The only question is who's theo. In a secular democracy, it would be demos, the people. In a Christian republic, it'd be Christ.
The video you saw earlier introduced Pastor Doug Wilson, a self-described Christian nationalist who openly states his goal to make the United States a Christian nation and the entire world a Christian world. So, his growing network of over 150 churches includes a new congregation just blocks from Capitol Hill, drawing notable political figures such as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. So, Wilson's vision is not just personal belief, but a political ambition aligning with broader efforts within government to infuse public policy with a conservative Christian worldview.
So the critiques of broader Christian nationalism in Christendom have abounded. They've proliferated. I've got a mild critique. We've been talking about intense stuff. One fear is that the church will become, if the government takes it over, the government mucks up everything it touches. And would you say that there's any danger that if the government and church are one and the same, or that there's an established church, would you say there's any danger that the church will be like the DMV?
Yes. Yeah, who wants to worship in a service run by the DMV? Not me. No. So not me.
No.
So thank you. This is a great question. There's a distinction between theocracy, which every society is. What's the god of the system?
Mammon.
Okay.
Well, right now.
Mammon or Allah. In certain societies, Allah is the god of the system. In ours, it's Mammon. It used to be the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ.
And so we have a lot of evangelicals who do believe that the U.S. should be distinctively Christian, but about 20% actually reject or resist that ideology. So in this sense, what we're really looking at across religious traditions, again, is this desire to see Christianity privileged above other religious groups, and making sure that it has access to power within the government and at all levels.
What we want is what the founders envisioned and what for 2 centuries plus made us the greatest nation in the world, and that's a representative constitutional republic, a principled republic based on belief in natural law, the moral awareness that is written on the heart of all people, but it's also written in the 10 Commandments. In Exodus chapter 20.
Can you talk about the dark side of Christian nationalism for people who are perhaps unaware of the sort of nefarious ramifications of this kind of ideology?
I mean, it's very much about telling people how to live.
Second only to Israel under King Solomon, but our nation is worth fighting for. Our nation is worth loving and caring about. And I proudly own the term Christian nationalist. The left can call me that all they want, because I am a Christian and I love the United States of America. And bad news, wokies, millions and millions of others love America too. And we're going to do what we can to be stewards of this blessed nation.
Theocracy. It isn't a word you often hear in American politics these days, but given the religious rhetoric coming from some Republican candidates this year, it doesn't feel as far-fetched or hyperbolic as it would have been in the past. Frankly, it feels possible. There are candidates embracing the idea that whatever the First Amendment actually says about the free exercise or establishment of religion, that this wall between church and state should actually come down. And not only that, these folks argue the wall was actually never supposed to be there in the first place. In fact, here's Lauren Boebert. She's a freshman member of Congress from Colorado. She was speaking this summer to congregants. Here's what she said.
The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk.
She's not alone. The Republican candidate for governor in Pennsylvania, the nation's 5th most populous state, said this to his supporters.
So much for this myth of separation of church and state.
That's right. And that's the same position that Michael Peroutka, the Republican nominee for Maryland Attorney General, it's a position he's taken since at least 2014 when he called the separation of church and state, quote, the great lie. And he added, there can be no separation of God from government because he, capital H there, created it. That would have been news to the founders, especially Thomas Jefferson, who was the first of the founders to use the phrase, the wall of separation metaphor, to describe the First Amendment's religious freedom protections. Other Republicans, though, are openly embracing Christian nationalism.
We need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists.
In recent years, he's attracted widespread attention online, amassing over 2 million followers on Facebook for his highly controversial political beliefs.
The Associated Press said that Joe Biden is president. Ha!
He is one of many fundamentalist pastors generating large social media followings by preaching politics from the pulpit.
But we shouldn't talk politics and religion. Says who, Satan?
American leftists always seem to need a boogeyman. When they're not demonizing MAGA Republicans, they're demonizing Christian nationalists. So what is a Christian nationalist?
We're a think tank. We have a policy bent towards us. We have goals that are 1 year, 5 year, 25, 50 year aims. And I would put Christian nationalism and really the desire for Christian nationalism in that bucket.
Vote says it's about preserving a Judeo-Christian heritage through sound public policy decisions.
I do believe that America has been, should be, and I hope it to be someday a Christian nation that affords religious liberty to everyone.
The label Christian nationalism is often heard in media and political circles, and this election year, you're going to hear a lot about this. Depending on the source, attempts to define the term paint it as more ominous than ever before. Well, CBN's chief political analyst David Brody brings us the story.
Since Donald Trump's entry into politics began with a ride down the Trump Tower escalator almost 9 years ago, the presidential candidate spoke directly to evangelical Christians, and many responded in kind. In 2024, not much has changed.
We have to bring back our religion. We have to bring back Christianity in this country.
This unholy marriage of religion and politics is the narrative of American Christian nationalism. That's no doubt a phrase you've seen and heard a lot of. It's an ideology that believes that the US was always intended to be a Christian nation, that it's backslidden into horrid liberal secularism, and that it desperately needs to be reclaimed by Christians and rededicated as a nation for God. And these aren't fringe beliefs either. According to the Pew Research Center, 60% of Americans believe that the founders intended the country to be a Christian nation. 45% believe that it should be one today. And of that 45%, more than half believe that the Bible should influence US law and take precedence over the will of the people. Christian nationalism is the framework that animates these ideas. It's been diagnosed as one of the key components in Donald Trump's victory in 2016. It's been cited as one of the ingredients that led to January 6th. It's no doubt going to play a big role in the 2024 election. We've got prominent Republicans self-identifying as Christian nationalist. Lauren Boebert is literally calling for the dissolution of the separation between church and state.
That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
In the summertime, the church holds an event they call Freedom Sunday, a patriotic service blending piety and politics. Imagine a cross between Easter and the 4th of July, where congregants are decked out in red, white, and blue, wave American flags, cheer at indoor fireworks, and worship to the battle hymn of the Republic just as they would with any traditional hymn. In 2020, the annual service climaxed with Pastor Robert Jeffress preaching to the congregation a sermon titled "America is a Christian Nation," in which he spoke out against the idea that the Founding Fathers intended the country to be a secular nation without religious influence, with church and state totally separate.
Let's talk about the two billionaires that I think basically control state government here in Texas. And I don't know if you or even your listeners necessarily know about them. It's two billionaires from West Texas. Their names are Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks, Dunn and Wilks. But they made their money in oil and gas, but they are also Christian nationalist pastors.
Oh.
Which, billionaire pastor, you would think that's an oxymoron. But on Sunday mornings, these two billionaires, they preach at these far-right churches, and they've got very extreme views. They don't think anybody who's not a Christian should serve an elected office.
Whoa.
In fact, you can look this up. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. But they told the former Republican Speaker of the Texas House, a guy named Joe Strauss from San Antonio, that he didn't have a right to be Speaker because he's Jewish. And that's a Republican. So they are dominionists, they're Christian nationalists, this is the world that they have. But they basically, every single Republican state senator in Texas has taken their money. Every single one. A majority of the Republicans in the state house have taken their money. And for some of those lawmakers, a majority of their total campaign contributions come from just these two guys. Like they increasingly run this whole government here in Texas. And you ask where the Ten Commandments bill comes from. You ask where that school counselor chaplain bill comes from, the voucher bill, the abortion ban. A lot of this is driven by these two billionaires.
That's wild.
And they give to politicians, but it's actually much bigger than that because they have this sprawling network of think tanks, advocacy organizations, media outlets, the Daily Wire, right, funded by them. So like they are creating an empire to control every aspect of the state. I mean, I don't mean to sound alarmist, but that's what's happening. And again, your listeners should do their own research on this to learn about it. But there's been a lot of stories about these two billionaires and their control over state government.
Cold northern Idaho have driven the Christian cultural conversation, or you've at least shifted the center of gravity towards this topic of Christian nationalism, and now mere Christendom. What's the distinction between those terms? Is that a rebrand? Are they distinct? I see you have your Mere Christendom book. What's it about? And then what's Stephen Wolfe's book about?
So Stephen Wolfe's book is sort of like a test case of Christian nationalism in a particular nation. What does it look like in one nation? Not what does it look like in America as the chosen nation, but what does it look like in one nation?
They actually literally want to take over towns and cities, and they have access to this administration.
Wilson is part of a broader Christian nationalist movement making inroads with the Trump administration, with a newly created faith office led by evangelical pastor Paula White Cain, and people seen right outside the White House entrance praying and speaking in tongues.
We are standing on the soil of the White House, and we are declaring your word.
How precious.
And now there's a monthly prayer service at the Pentagon, initiated by Hegseth, Wilson's highest level connection to the administration.
It's not organizationally tied to us, but it's the kind of thing we love to see.
For his part, Hegseth has publicly praised Wilson.
Now we're standing on the shoulders of a generation later, the Doug Wilsons and the others.
And as Wilson grows closer to the mainstream, the critics are also getting louder, accusing him and other Christian nationalists of wanting to create the dystopian world from The Handmaid's Tale, something he insists has never been his goal for society.
I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not a fascist. I'm not a racist. I'm not a misogynist.
How far off do you see a Christian nation, like a full-on Christian theocracy?
Oh, 250 years.
250 years.
Yeah, honestly, that's yes.
What you see. But you do think it will happen?
Yes, I do. We're not going to usher in anything ourselves. We're really genuinely pioneers.
John, we reached out to the Defense Department to better understand the relationship between Wilson and Hegseth, and a DoD spokesman said that Hegseth is a, quote, proud member of the network of churches founded by Pastor Wilson, and he also said that Hegseth, quote, very much appreciates many of Mr. Wilson's writings and teachings. John?
Pamela Brown, thank you so much. That's fascinating.
You know, that to me, again, is an example of Christian nationalism. It's using the state, it's using political power to elevate one religious tradition over all the others. It's using governmental power to dominate our neighbors instead of loving them as ourselves, which is exactly what we're called to do as Christians. And then, of course, most recently we saw this bill that defunded public schools here in Texas to subsidize private Christian schools. And to me, again, that is a bill that's right in the middle of this Christian nationalist movement to erode the separation of church and state and force a certain interpretation of Christianity on everybody against their wills.
Yeah, there's this narrative that this is a Christian nation. This is it was founded as a Christian nation, and I think they call upon that.
Yeah.
When they're making these decisions and talking about it in this very particular way.
Yeah, and I think no one would disagree that Christianity was influential in the founding of this country, and is still influential. I mean, it's suffused throughout our culture, our politics. It is a central part of who we are as a nation.
Today, a federal judge in San Antonio will continue to listen to arguments about a new state law requiring the Ten Commandments to be displayed in public school classrooms. 16 families from various religious and non-religious backgrounds are suing to block the state from enforcing the law. It's set to go into effect September 1st. And the ACLU filed a lawsuit.
All right, we are moving to this. We follow more breaking news where a Texas federal judge has blocked the state from requiring public schools to display the 10 Commandments in every classroom. The judge noted the posting the commandments would likely prompt questions from students that teachers might feel forced to answer. The ruling stops the law from going into effect on September 1st. Now, the case is expected to continue and could eventually go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The key player here is Constantine. In 321, he calls the Council of Nicaea. He begins to favor Christianity. He doesn't make it the official religion of the empire. That comes later. But he does favor it. He wanted Christianity to help unify the empire.
But 300 years after that, after the Roman Empire crucified Jesus, Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of that very same empire, the same empire that crucified Jesus. So this is 300 years later, and now Christianity is the official sponsor of the empire, of Western civilization.
Do you think Constantine was a Christian, like legitimately, or do you think that he was using it?
It's always hard to tell with politicians, and I say this as a politician myself.
When was Constantine baptized?
Well, he was baptized, I don't know the year, but he was baptized after he had this vision before a decisive battle, when he saw the cross and decided that his soldiers would put the cross as part of their emblem, and then they won that battle, right? Which, who knows if it was because of his vision or not. But it started a trend which we've struggled with for literally, more than 1,500 years of powerful people, emperors, billionaires, dictators, megachurch pastors using religion to protect their own wealth and power.
Yeah.
From the Vatican. In his nearly 1-hour annual speech to diplomats accredited to the Vatican, Pope Francis spoke of the rise of nationalism, warning that the reemergence of populist and nationalist ideologies is progressively weakening multilateral institutions and subsequently creating a general lack of trust, a crisis of credibility in international political life, and a gradual marginalization of the most vulnerable members of the family of nations.
E dove c'è l'amore, non c'è spazio per I pregiudizi, per le distanze di sicurezza che ci allontanano dal prossimo, per la logica dell'esclusione che vediamo emergere purtroppo anche nei nazionalismi politici.
As Bible prophecy watchers, we must carefully consider the implications of this fusion of church and state. So, the rise of Christian nationalism in America. Christian nationalism has rapidly moved from the fringes to the heart of political power. Recent gatherings in Washington, D.C. have seen hundreds of thousands rallying openly with chants that America must be ruled by a Christian God. This movement blends evangelical Christianity with far-right political activism, seeking to align government laws and policies with their interpretation of biblical principles. Doug Wilson's teachings emphasize a patriarchal society where women submit to husbands, voting rights for women are questioned, and homosexuality and abortion are viewed as criminal offenses. So, these views, once considered extreme, now find more acceptance among influential Republican leaders. The Trump administration's creation of a federal faith office to address alleged anti-Christian bias exemplifies the merging of government and religious interests. Wilson's network of churches, businesses, and schools operates as a community working toward this vision, and his growing ties to administration officials suggests this is more than rhetoric. It is a strategic movement gaining momentum in Washington.
In the aftermath of those events, many news organizations took a closer look, resulting in stories such as the growing danger of Christian nationalism that's rooted in political power and even violence. Georgetown professor Paul Miller wrote the book, What's Wrong with Christian Nationalism? A new Public Religion Research Institute poll shows roughly 3 in 10 Americans qualify as Christian nationalist adherents or sympathizers. But in that specific survey, the criteria cites someone as a Christian nationalist if they believe the following: that the government should declare America a Christian nation, laws should be based on Christian values, that we will not have a country anymore if America moves away from our Christian foundations, being Christian is an important part of being truly American, and that God has called Christians to exercise dominion over all areas of American society. Well,
long before Trump, these Christian nationalists have been playing a decades-long game.
Yeah, so I don't want a perfectly free market. I want the state first. I want the state to be Christian, which we currently don't have. And separation of church and state, that's fine. But separation of Christ and state, no way.
Dangers of right-wing Christianity. That's what this movement is. They have played a marathon, not a sprint, and now they're in power, and they use Trump.
It also threatens religious freedom for Christians as well.
because a government-sponsored religion has never been a good thing for religion or religious liberty. Government is uniquely ill-qualified in matters of religion. And so no matter our religious belief, we as Americans should not want the government to promote our religion. And Christian nationalism argues for just that. It argues for a privileged place for Christianity in American society. And it argues that to truly belong as an American, one must be Christian and have a particular Christian viewpoint.
Remember when Trump ran in 2016, a lot of the mainline evangelicals wanted nothing to do with the divorced, real estate mogul who cheated on his wife and with a porn star and all of that, right? So what happened was he was surrounded by this more extremist element. You're going to hear words like Christian nationalism, like the new apostolic Reformation. These are groups that you should get very schooled on, because they have a lot of power in Trump's circle. And the one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God. The problem with that is that they are determining men are determining what God is telling them.
Project 2025, a blueprint for Christian nationalism. Behind the scenes lies Project 2025, a 922-page policy blueprint released by the Conservative Heritage Foundation. This plan, framed as a playbook for a potential second Trump administration, advocates sweeping changes across government aimed at embedding a Christian nationalist worldview into federal policy.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act and placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control. In addition, I'm employing the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
I guess aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America.
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Do you believe if Donald Trump were elected next year that he would try to stay in office beyond a second term? That he would never leave office?
There's no question.
You think he would try to stay in power forever?
Absolutely.
President Trump is deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C. While he says his administration aims to crack down on crime and homelessness, some are asking if this move is part of a Project 2025. At almost 1,000 pages long, it is an ambitious and controversial right-wing blueprint for transforming executive power. And just over 200 days into Trump's second term, one online tracker says the agenda is nearly halfway through completion.
Written by a prominent conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 is a plan to fundamentally reshape America. Its 900 pages set out how a president should expand their power by, among other things, gutting the federal workforce and abolishing the Department of Education. What about Project 2025? Well, the document called for the president to slash regulations and make federal employees easier to fire.
Project 2025, I've said 100 times, I know nothing about it. I had nothing to do.
That was Donald Trump on the campaign trail, distancing himself from Project 2025, a right-wing plan to tear down swathes of the U.S. government.
Over the next hour, I will lay out the greatest threat to the American democratic experiment in modern times, and it's called Project 2025. This is the 922-page MAGA manifesto. We printed the whole thing out, and it's brought to you by one of the most conservative DC think tanks, the Heritage Foundation. This is the culmination of nearly 50 years of work that began during the Reagan administration. Broadly, according to Heritage President Kevin Roberts, this is a Christian nationalist plan to end what he calls the Great Awakening and, quote, rescue our kids, reclaim our culture, revive our economy, and defeat the anti-American left at home and abroad.
Groundwork and detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America, and that's coming.
What about Project 2025? Well, the document called for the president to slash regulations and make federal employees easier to fire.
Roughly 140 individuals who worked in Trump's administration are affiliated with Project 2025, including 6 former cabinet secretaries and 4 people who were nominated as ambassadors by Trump. The others were either key figures from his first transition, close Oval Office allies, or mid-level agency officials. There's Russell Vought, Trump's former Office of Management and Budget Director, who wrote Chapter 2 in the section titled Taking the Reins of Federal Government. In this chapter, he lays out how to consolidate power around a president's political vision. He explains how you can bypass Congress and only fund projects that ensure consistency with the president's agenda. He is rumored to be Trump's choice for chief of staff. And according to Politico, he and Trump speak once a month. Vought hopes his close relationship with Trump will elevate Christian nationalism as a focal point of a second Trump administration. Then there's Roger Severino, a former Trump administration DOJ official, who wrote Chapter 14 about the Department of Health and Human Services and how to restrict abortion access across the country. Lately, former President Donald Trump and his campaign, fearful of how unpopular Project 2025 is, have claimed they have nothing to do with it.
I don't know what that is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
Yeah, but that's not the complete picture. Here is Trump promoting the Heritage Foundation and their little project just 2 years ago.
This is very significant. Analysts describe Project 2025 as authoritarian and religiously exclusive, with explicit calls to dismantle or reshape federal agencies, prioritize faith-based funding, and enforce broad religious exemptions. These include allowing religious schools to ignore accreditation, rules that conflict with their faith mission, and permitting healthcare providers to refuse services on moral grounds.
Then there is Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, a self-described radicalized Republican who is a champion of Kevin Roberts and his plan to turn the Heritage Foundation into the de facto institutional home of Trumpism. Here you see Vance and Roberts together on a panel last year at an event hosted by the Intercollegiate Institute, which is a conservative organization for college students. This particular discussion was about regime change and the future of liberalism. Guess what else? Kevin Roberts has a book coming out in September, and J.D. Vance wrote the foreword to that book, in which he praises Roberts' vision for America. He also wrote, "We are now all realizing that it's time to circle the wagons and load the muskets. In the fights that lay ahead, these ideas are an essential weapon." Vance's current political ideology lines up pretty succinctly with that of Project 2025, and his backing of Kevin Roberts, along with his frequent appearances on Tucker Carlson's talk show, might explain why he is on the Trump ticket. This clip from his Senate campaign run might also have helped too.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. Yeah, I mean, I think
one striking feature of Project 2025 is its treatment of the Sabbath. The plan declares on page 589, quote, God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest, and until very recently, the Judeo-Christian tradition sought to honor that mandate by moral and legal regulation of work on that day. It then proposes on this page, Congress, quote, Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labor Standards Act to require that workers be paid time and a half for hours worked on the Sabbath. That day would default to Sunday, except for employers with a sincere religious observance of a Sabbath at a different time, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. The obligation would transfer to that period instead. So, this proposal echoes the biblical principle found in Exodus 20, 8-11. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. It's the Lord's day. In it thou shalt not do any work. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, or made it holy. Here, God's commandment clearly establishes the seventh day as a sacred rest period, a principle that modern Sunday enforcement policies directly challenge, raising important questions about religious liberty. So, Sunday laws, history, and modern echoes. Sunday laws, or blue laws, are not a new American invention. They date back to the early centuries of Christianity, notably the Council of Laodicea in AD 364, which forbade Christians from Judaizing by resting on the biblical Sabbath, Saturday, and instead mandated honoring Sunday as the Lord's Day, as they were interpreting it. So, the Catholic Church codified this tradition in canon law with Canon 1247, declaring Sunday Mass attendance a grave obligation. Many Catholic majority nations still enforce Sunday rest laws today. For example, Poland enacted laws limiting Sunday retail activity endorsed by Catholic bishops to strengthen family life and promote worship.
Polish President Andrzej Duda signed into law a bill that largely limits trade on Sundays, saying it will benefit employees' family life. The legislation worked out by the conservative government and the Solidarity Trade Union is expected to draw protests from large Western supermarket chains that are the main target of the law. A large part of their profit is earned on weekends, when many do their big weekly shop. Critics say some of them make employees work long hours for modest pay. Duda said big traders will need to adjust their practices to the new system and ask them for understanding.
The Christian world is remarkably united when it comes to honoring the first day of the week as the day when the Lord is to be worshipped. But when it comes to our theology of it, we are all over the road.
In the United States, most blue laws have been repealed, but some remain, such as restrictions on Sunday business hours in North Dakota. Studies show these laws support higher church attendance and charitable giving, reinforcing the social importance of Sunday rest. So, the Catholic Church's role and ecumenical alliance risks. The Catholic Church's emphasis on Sunday rest and worship forms an important backdrop for understanding modern Sunday law movements. Catholic leaders have praised Sunday laws for promoting family cohesion and societal moral health, yet Project 2025's broader policies often conflict with Catholic social teaching on human dignity, immigration, and welfare. Despite disagreements, the shared support for Sunday law observance between Catholic authorities and evangelical Christian nationalists represents a powerful ecumenical alliance. This convergence sets a prophetic stage where historic Protestant Catholic tensions over Sabbath and Sunday observance could give way to united enforcement of Sunday worship by civil law. Biblical prophecy, the union of church and state. The Bible warns about a future union of religious and civil power that will enforce worship laws. Matter of fact, in Revelation 13, we read, He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. This emphasizes the future enforcement of worship, underscoring the seriousness of government-sanctioned religious mandates. So, the rise of Christian nationalism, combined with Project 2025's promotion of Sunday laws and religious exemptions, suggests we are moving closer to this prophetic fulfillment. This enforced worship will conflict with God's true Sabbath commandment and conscience rights, leading to a greater crisis. A call to vigilance and faithfulness. Believers are called to spiritual vigilance. In Revelation 14:12 reminds us of, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God, that includes the Sabbath, and the faith of Jesus. So in these times, maintaining faithfulness to God's commandments, including honoring the seventh-day Sabbath, is central to our witness. As the pressure mounts for enforced Sunday worship, we must stand firm in biblical truth, defend religious liberty, and be prepared to witness boldly. This is a time for prayer, discernment, and courage. The prophetic clock is ticking. The forces pushing for a Christian nationalist theocracy and Sunday law enforcement are growing stronger. But God's people are called to remain faithful and true. Thank you for watching Amazing Prophecies. Share this urgent message with your family and friends. Stay informed, stay prayerful, and watch for further updates on these unfolding prophetic events. May God bless you richly as you remain vigilant in these critical times.